And we titled this presentation "A Better Way to TA," because that's what we think we've done. But before I get into it, just briefly, I'm going to introduce ourselves. I'm Dan. That's me. In case you didn't guess, I've been an entrepreneur for my whole life. So TrendSpider is my 5th startup. I just sold my last company in March of last year, and I've been a trader since 2008. So I started at a crazy time. I lost a bunch of money. I learned a lot of lessons. Right. I got introduced to technical analysis, the reason I want to talk about my background a bit is my last company was all about automation. Right. So we automated deploying servers, something that took people days to do. We did it in 30 minutes. It changed that industry. Sorry. No. It changed that industry, and it was very successful. And I want to do the same thing for trading that we did for cloud hosting. So that's kind of where the idea for TrendSpider came about. I'm going to talk a little bit about the problem, just to give some background, right? Why we built this and why we think automation is important in technical analysis. And that's because it's really hard. And I know some people, JC, make it look really easy, but it's really hard. That's the reason why most traders are net losers. And in our research, this is actually something we learned. We researched this when we were first conceptualizing this project. Lots of traders sign up for chat rooms. They buy all kinds of tools. These are often really good tools, but they still lose money, right? Despite all their education and the time they spend reading, right? I mean, every trader I know, reads Investopedia constantly. They're always Googling things, trying to understand how different indicators work, the math behind them. No matter how much you do, a lot of traders still end up being losers. And there's a few reasons for that. I'm going to spend a little time talking about those. One is, the guys from MarketSmiths, from Trade Ideas will agree with this. TA should be empirical, right? It should be objective. It should not be subjective, but it is. And that's because humans are the ones doing the analysis, right? So everybody will eyeball a chart differently, down to how many candlesticks are on your screen at that time. End up drawing a trend line and then looking at it an hour later and deciding that's not right and redrawing it, right? Sometimes after it's broken, which is a big no-no. You end up measuring and remeasuring your fibs. I mean, all this stuff and much, much more. I think I have a bunch of slides that talk about it. Make it difficult to be a technical trader. What that really boils down to is it's tough to stay consistent all the time. The more successful you are, the more positions you have, it's harder to keep track of them. And a single distraction, right? A few minutes of a phone call at the wrong time, or your kid running in the room, or anything can wipe out days worth of gains. Right, and I always like to say this, right? It's hard work for anybody. Maybe not JC, because you can look at 500 charts and not break a sweat. But for most people, I don't mean to pick on you. For most people, it can be really hard. The subjectiveness leads to what I call profit-killing mistakes, right? And this is all standard stuff that we've heard about. But FOMO, the one I want to just zero in on is this inconsistent analysis, right? Because a lot of people have a trading system that they want to follow, but they don't follow it consistently. Right, and that starts with their analysis. They don't analyze their charts the same way every time. And how do you know if your system works if you don't do it the same way every time? Right, that's really do a bunch of my different systems work, right, or not? And you can't really, plan from that. So, we built a solution, and at first we built it as an MVP, right? So we, intended to just try it out ourselves and see if we could do this. And we did, and it kind of worked, right? And we decided to run with it, right? So we started dumping a lot of time and resources into it. We built up our dev team. And TrendSpider, I talked a little bit about why. What it is really 4 systems built into one. And Jake's going to go into a lot of detail on this. But it's a charting platform. It's an automation system layered on top of that charting platform. It's this thing we call MTFA, or multi-time frame analysis, which is a whole new layer on top of the automation platform. And then it's an alerting system, and Jake's going to show you a lot of the alerts because we're very proud of them. We have a patent pending on them, and it's something we spent a lot of time on. The key is these 4 things work together to make you more consistent in your trading decisions, right? I just want to highlight this, right? Because, you talk automation, right? What does that mean, right? Well, it means high consistency versus low, right? It means no biases, because honestly, our algorithms don't care what Elon Musk said last night. It doesn't matter, right? It means a lot faster results. You can crunch a chart in seconds. And honestly, if you're doing it yourself, it's going to take you some time, right? And the more you second guess yourself, the more time it's going to take. right? Automation never gets tired, right? TrendSpider, give me an analysis. It's going to give it to you every time. It's not going to need coffee. It doesn't smoke, right? Like, it's pretty chill. And the precision, right? The precision is key for me. Like, I don't think my eyes are that great at reading a chart. Like, did I zoom in too much? Did I zoom out, right? Like, did I draw my trend line right? It's just what looks right to me, and that's super subjective. And everybody here will draw a different trend line on the same chart every single time. Maybe not every single time, but a lot of the times, right? And then, there's this just human capacity. How many charts can you watch at one time, realistically, right? Like, can you have 50 monitors with 10 charts each and pay attention to each of them? Like, I sure as hell can't, right? I mean, I can barely pay attention to like 8. And even then, like, the one I'm trading usually gets ignored. I end up losing, right? Because, like, it's a lot of information, and it's moving very fast, right? And then, when you start layering on other time frames, it becomes overwhelming. So TrendSpider ties together a lot of automated tools in one platform to kind of achieve these goals. And the first, where it starts is a charting platform. So, we wanted there to be no compromises for someone to use our tool. So we spent a lot of time building a platform that's modern, right? It's web-based, runs in a browser, there's no software installed, it doesn't care what OS you use. A lot of the analysis actually takes place in the cloud. So, it's not too taxing on your resources, right? It all runs in the cloud and just displays in your browser. We include real-time data. It is completely streaming, and there's no delays. It feels snappy, like Thinkorswim would or Interactive Brokers, and we spend a lot of time on that. And it's very hard to do in a web-based platform. On top of that, we layer an automation engine, and Jake's going to show you a lot about that. But this is the point I want to drill home on. This is it's highly customizable. This is not the TrendSpider way to analyze charts. It's your way, automated. And you can customize what that means, which candlestick patterns you care about, how you want to draw trend lines, what time frames you want to compare, how you configure your alerts. There's a lot of flexibility that's built right in. And it's just on you to tweak it. So what comes with by default is Dan settings or our team settings, really. But that doesn't mean that there's the only way to use it. Really, it's not. I don't even recommend you do that. I recommend you go in and play with it and learn how to tweak it, because it can match your style and then do it much faster than you with greater consistency. On top of that, we have, and we're going to spend a lot of time on this, but we have our alert system, and we're very proud of this. We actually just launched our multi-factor alerts. What was it, like a week ago or so? Yeah. So we spent a long time building those. We've had our standard dynamic alerts for a long time, but these are probably the most flexible alerting system in the industry. And it is an attempt to mirror how a human would watch a chart. Right, so people don't look at like a fixed price level and it just traded there. They want to see a candlestick. They want to see it pull back or break through. Right, it's all about the pattern on the chart, not the fact that it traded. And a lot of people get faked out by stop losses because it's a fixed level, right? Or fixed level buy alerts. It's a great way to get caught in a bull trap. We think confirmation is key, and the candlestick exists to give us confirmation. So why don't we use that in our alerts, right? When you pull it all together, you end up having a new kind of workflow for how you analyze charts and how you look for trades, right? You start by once configuring your analysis, just one time, right? How you want it to look, how you want it to analyze your charts. Take some time. We do training to teach people how to do it, because it isn't it isn't just like the simplest thing, but it's not too hard either. Once you do that, you throw up a watch list. You can pull that from Trade Ideas. You can pull that from FinViz. That's what I tend to use. Or whatever watch list you want to look, and you start to flip through your symbols. I just recommend using your keyboard arrow keys up and down. TrendSpider will pull up a chart. It'll analyze it in seconds, right? The way you want it to do. It'll find every trend line. Oops. It'll find every candlestick pattern, anything that you might be looking for on it that you've configured in your analysis for you, and you just eyeball it at that point. If you see something you like, you create an alert. Right? The alert will follow the waveform of the indicator it's on, or the slope of the trend line, or the waveform and slope of numerous indicators and numerous trend lines and the interactions between them. Right? And it'll do it all for you in the cloud. It doesn't matter if your Comcast goes out or not, or if you close your computer. Right? It's going to do all this monitoring in real time. And when those conditions are met, whatever they may be, it'll let you know. Right, and you can go back to your desk and decide to trade at that point, or decide to wait, right? And the whole idea is you can't stare at 50 symbols all day long. But TrendSpider can stare at thousands, and it doesn't phase it to add any more or any less, right? It's just analyzing the whole market all the time. So I'm going to pass it off to Jake. And Jake, I'm sorry, didn't give you a chance to give you an intro. So
yeah, thanks for that, Dan. No worries, I'll introduce myself. My name is Jake. I'm one of the founding members of TrendSpider. I've been trading since I was 12 years old. Have blown up quite a few accounts on the way, but that's really only made me the trader I am today. So it's all good. But so as Dan was mentioning, we are really 3 layers. At the first part, we're a charting platform, and then on the second layer, we're an automated technical analysis system. And the third layer is the alert system. So to start out, I'll start with trends because they're already pulled up. But essentially, these trend lines are what are found by these current preferences on the trend feature. So for example, the analysis type, the drawing input, and the islands or the gaps are the 3 variables that the system is looking for. And that's going to change how the chart looks based on how these variables are. So one cool thing is when I go to advanced, you'll see these base points. And these base points are really what are the base foundation of how the system is looking for these trend lines. Now, when I go to trends and I change the analysis type, so original was Dan's kind of settings that he liked to use for swing trading, but I actually like enhanced, and I was able to do a little work on that. And you'll see when we change this, the base points are also going to change. So the more sensitive your analysis is, the base points are going to be lower because you're looking at a smaller range. Now, the cool thing is, let's just go back to original. Now, obviously, these are not a ton of lines right here, and I understand that. But the cool thing is, these are not all the lines. These are just the lines that are filtered by the system in the most relevant form. So when we go to show trends, we'll actually be able to show more lines on the chart. And what that does is it kind of starts the unfiltering process of the system and allows you to kind of see these lines that the system's not catching on the most relevant mode. Now, some of the most relevant areas that I would look at would be this channel resistance here. So I double click on that, lock that in, and then the channel support, the megaphone channel support here. Double click, locked in, and when I go back to most relevant, those lines are then locked into the system, and then we can start kind of cleaning up the chart. So for example, if I don't want this line, I'll just remove it. And if I want to add a line that's not necessarily part of the preferences that I'm using, I can easily go to the drawing tool, click trend line, and add another trend line that I feel is relevant. So for example, if we wanted to connect the wick here and the wick here, we kind of have this wedge forming now. So it's the ability to automate your style as well as personalize it too with the drawing tool if there's not every trend line you want to find. At the end of the day, the software is not going to find every trend line you're looking for because each one is based on a preference. And so that's how we can kind of mix up the manual side of it and then the preference side of it. And it's about automation, but what it's also about, as Dan mentioned, is removing bias. And it's also about showing trend lines that you may not think about. If we go to all, these are all the trend lines that the system is currently finding based on these preferences. So you can really get some interesting ideas how this works, without having to do too much work on your end. It's automated. It's really made to make your technical analysis more efficient. Now, the cool thing is what we've also automated is the ability to automate your fib levels. So when we click auto fib here, and we have to turn it on, you'll see that the Fibonacci level is automatically going to pick up. Now, this is a function of what your trend preferences are, but we are getting to the point where this is going to be more manually kind of available to you for you to mess around with. And but for now, we do have the ability to automatically draw these Fibonacci levels. And the really cool thing, and what Dan was mentioning, was the multi-time frame analysis. Now, obviously, we've got this Fibonacci level here. Well, let's turn on MTFA, and just a quick note, all of our main core features are going to be right here. Obviously, indicators are just kind of basic on any charting platform, but this does have a little bit of a twist. So when I turn on MTFA, we can actually overlay the weekly Fibonacci levels on the daily chart. So what we're doing is we're looking at how the short-term price action is interacting with the long-term indicators, the long-term price levels, and we can get an idea of really kind of how the long-term stuff is affecting short-term price action. Now, what's really cool about this is with any of these trend lines, we can create an alert on them. So when I right-click here and create alert, we have to first look at what triggers we want to look for. So we can choose from a breakthrough, a touch, or a bounce. So you can choose whatever criteria you'd like. And the really unique thing about the alert system on the trend lines, as well as the indicators, is you can create sensitivity. So what we mean by that is when I move this all the way to the left, the sensitivity is going to be very low, meaning that the price action needs to get very close to this trend line for it to be triggered. Now what we can see here is this little guy right here, this hanging man, did not make it fully to this trend line. So what you would have been able to do is essentially increase the sensitivity, and then you're able to essentially see that you can now create this alert with the price action kind of working with your margin of error, if you will. So you can see here, the alert is going to fire within $2.63 of this trend line. So there's kind of a deviation there that you're working with, and you're able to kind of capture some of those moves that may reverse right before the indicator that you're looking at, or the trend line, whatever it may be. Now, this is cool as well. On the time frame side of things, we have the daily candle. Now, that means when the daily candle gets into this purple area, that's when the alert is going to fire, anytime that it closes in this area. Well, if you're a day trader, you don't give a crap about that. You want to be alerted immediately when the short-term candle interacts with this area. So what you can do, if you're a day trader, you'd probably want to go on the 5 or the 10 minute to get that alert right when it happens. So let's do the 5 minute. We've got this very interesting engine that creates some interesting alert names. Let me get this. But let's just change this to previous resistance. And then we can make a description, and then you can choose how long you want the expiration to be, whether that's 1 day, whether that's the trigger has happened X amount of times. You can choose that all here. So we'll just create the alert, and then it's stuck on the chart, and you can see it when you're doing your analysis. Now, the cool thing is, obviously Dan was talking about the multi-criteria alerts, and what you can do there is essentially I'll turn on the indicators button. And before I get into the multi-criteria alerts, I want to show how you can essentially use the same alert system on these indicators. So for example, here, when I right-click, create the alert, I'm essentially doing the same exact thing as I did with the trend line, except now we're following the waveform of the indicator. So in this case, we're following the SMA 20 on the daily candle. And so for example, you can do the same exact thing. You can increase or decrease the sensitivity depending on how exact you want the trade to go, or how precise you want the alert to be, and it's the same exact thing. So same criteria, you can make all the same alert names, whatever, so it's very similar in that sense. Now, the cool thing that I wanted to mention here is the ability to also overlay multiple time frames and use these multiple time frames on the criteria and the conditional criteria. So before I do that, I did want to show, this was kind of cool. Obviously, we had a big move down, and that's been talked about a lot this conference. But this is actually the simple moving average from the weekly chart overlaid on the daily chart. And what you can see here, and this is really cool, you can essentially see how the short-term price action was interacting with the longer-term areas of resistance, such as the SMA 20. And we actually triple top there. And when we did kind of miss this area, the 78.6% fib level on the weekly candle was able to kind of catch that. So using multiple time frames, multiple indicators, obviously as traders, you guys know the more things you use, the better kind of R squared you're going to get. You're just going to have better information to go off of. I forgot who mentioned it earlier, but sometimes too much is going to make you distracted, so there's definitely a fine line there. But what we really wanted to do is just be able to overlay and create a simple chart and not have 8 charts at the same time. We don't need the daily, the weekly, the monthly. We can really overlay that on one chart. And the cool thing about that is our alerts. And so when we go to the alerts, and this is just one that I created previously, For a possible breakdown of SPY, it looks pretty strong right now, but just in case, these are the multi-factor alerts. So essentially, you're creating conditional criteria for all of these things to happen or any of the following to happen. So you can really make this very robust. You can make it very personalized to how exactly you're trading and the conditions that you need to be met. In this case, I was looking for a daily candle close less than the daily SMA 20, which we can see would be, I'll have to exit out real quick. So here's the SMA 20. If we broke down, that was kind of my first criteria. And then looking at the lower indicator side of things, I was looking for the MACD fast to cross the MACD slow, which would indicate a possible bearish crossover. And I also like to use the vortex indicator as a crossover point for reversals, as well as the percent range. Well, let's say that we want a confirmation on the candle side as well. All we do is add a parameter here, create the condition. Let's say that we want a bearish engulfing candle on the daily to also form. We have the daily. We'll pick the candlestick pattern. We'll go down to engulfing bearish. And we now have that criteria as well. So I'm just adding more criteria to the alert. And you don't want to add too many criteria or it's probably never going to trigger, but that's where you can also add the any of the following to also get that kind of flexibility. So that is how these alerts work. The cool thing is if you have a setup or a signal that you really like, you can easily go and save this as a template. So you can use this over and over again. You're not going to have to make the alert again. And we're even going to get to the point where you can essentially have this template on a whole watch list. So you can have this looking at a number of different stocks, and you'll be alerted without having to look at 100 different charts on the same day. You're only going to be looking at what you're getting alert on. And so that makes things much more efficient. Now we also have a library that we've just kind of messed around with. For example, the RSI overbought would be something, we're looking at multiple time frames over a longer period. So maybe we're looking at the 5-minute, the 1 hour, and the daily, all having to hit overbought signals, and that would be a way for maybe you to say, all right, maybe it's time to start looking at shorting, or whatever the case may be. You can create these very complex criteria and really just set it and forget it. Now, kind of going to what I just mentioned with the bullish engulfing, we do have the ability to also show patterns on the chart. So for example, I had mentioned the hanging man here. And so when we go down to hanging man, and I can just kind of type it in, check it, and apply, we can see that the system actually found the hanging man right when we topped out. Now the thing I will mention is this is one of the features we do have that's not what I would say incredibly customizable, but what we're going towards is, so just full disclosure, these are just mathematical definitions by Bolkowski. So we're just using kind of his definitions and how he looks at it. And so it's really just one set of rules. Now what we want to get to the point is we want to get to the point where we have a library where JC's candles, Brian's candles. And so people can go in and they can start seeing, all right, JC looks at this candle a little different. And so you can start creating this criteria to filter out some of the noise. So for example, for me, maybe my criteria for a hanging man is only when the stock drops X amount of candles with an X%. Now, that essentially kind of allows me to filter out some of the noise that I may be having on the chart now. And so that's kind of how we can use that. We have a ton of different candlesticks to choose from, and that will continue to grow. And if you do have a candlestick that we don't have, you can easily request it here. Same thing on the indicator side of things. If there's an indicator that we do not have, you can easily request one here. Now, the last thing we have is heat maps, and these are kind of a newer feature, and we're still working on them. But essentially, oh, that's the second time this thing's dropped. The thing that we're working on is really finding price levels where the area has really consolidated. There's a lot of kind of choppiness, and that becomes the area where these red lines come from. Now, we do have a lot of work to do with that, but it is kind of in its first kind of form, and we will kind of improve it from there. But the last thing I wanted to kind of show, and this is really cool, I think, with the multi-time frame analysis, you can essentially, with any indicator, right? So let's go to some lower indicators, and I'll just turn on the MACD real quick. And what you can see here is we can actually have the daily price action, and then we can actually show how the weekly MACD is looking with the daily price action. So you're really having the ability to make your chart more efficient, overlay the longer time frames to really see how it's interacting with the shorter term stuff. There's quite a few more things that we could go over, but I think we're running out of time, and we're happy to answer any questions if you guys have any.
Definitely.
All right.
Go for it.
Testing. For your alerts, when you create a data set, and let's say it's it's an alert to buy, can you create a second data set, which would be an alert to sell, and then back test it?
So Jake didn't touch on this, but this vertical line here is called kind of a truth line. You can't move it right now, but in next, I think, quarter, right, we're going to make it so you can actually just change the date for it. And this indicates the point in time when the alerts and analysis would have been processed, right? So everything to the left of this line was part of the trend line detection fib. Everything to the right is how it played out. And it tells you very clearly when it did analysis, so there's no BS, right?
So here's an example. Sorry, I forgot about that. But here's an example of like Wells Fargo, for example. We go back pretty far when the last time the analysis was looked at by these systems. So if we want to update that, for example, I can turn on trends here on the daily, or this is the weekly. And essentially, you can kind of see once you update it that the trend lines may change. In this case, the weekly trend lines kind of make a different...
and the line moves over to the right.
And so, yeah, now the truth and analysis line is fully updated, and this is what the system is currently seeing based on this current price action.
For sure. Go ahead.
Congratulations, guys, on a great product and having a demo that works, and everything seems to have gone off without a hitch. So take a deep breath.
Thank you.
But this is really pretty amazing, and I certainly see the ways that this can be used. But let's talk a little bit about your business and the strategy a bit. When I see this charting technology, the first competitor that comes to mind is Chart IQ. Maybe you can riff a little bit about what your strategy is, to get around what they're doing in partnerships and how you plan to kind of counter them and or extend beyond what they do.
Yeah. So Chart IQ has a great product. Their technician app was discontinued, right? Which is where they made their product accessible to average, traders who wanted to use it. So now it's an institutional trading library, right? As far as I know, and it's $10,000 a year, right? And you need to integrate into your software. TrendSpider is meant to kind of level the playing field, right? Some of this technology exists in prop trading desks. I'm sure you guys have some similar stuff in some realms. A lot of companies who do their own proprietary trading have developed multi-time frame analysis tools and things like that. Average traders can't afford it, can't get it, right? It's not available to them. So we offer it as a SaaS model, right? It's between, I want to say $50 and $120 a month. We try to keep it affordable. Includes real-time data, and our plan is to expand into other markets, right? To offer data for Indian markets, Canadian, right? And all that kind of thing over time.